Welcome to Yale Center Beijing, Yale University's home here in China. I'm Carol Rafferty, a Yale College alumna and the executive director of the center. Anyone who's new to here? New to the center? Just a few of you. For those of you who are new, we were founded in 2014 as Yale University's embassy and activity center here in China, serving all 14 of our schools. And today, I have the honor of to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Stephen Roach, who has been a great supporter of the center since its founding. We are so grateful to have him make time to speak to our audience here while he's in town for the very important China Development Forum. I'd also like to thank our co-host, the Yale Club of Beijing, which is our local alumni club. So Dr. Stephen Roach needs no introduction. He is one of Wall Street's most influential economists. His insights have shaped policy debates in Washington, D.C. and in Beijing. And in addition to being a thought leader, he's a prolific author. And his latest book is Accidental Conflict, America, China, and the Clash of False Narratives, which was published by the Yale University Press and was recognized by the Financial Times as one of the best books in 2022. So tonight, it'll be a pretty simple setup. Dr. Stephen Roach will be giving a presentation on U.S. China relations in Trump 2.0, its implications on the economies of China, U.S., and the world. And he will also suggest how we can take it from here, from conflict escalation to resolution. After that, after his presentation, we're going to proceed to audience Q&A, so you will have a chance to ask Dr. Roach your questions directly. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Stephen Roach. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to be here. To a large extent, this feels like my home now in Beijing. I will say that I'm here, though, for the 25th year in a row to speak at the China Development Forum. I've spoken at that very important meeting at Daitai for all but the first year of that conference. Last year was a very challenging year for me because they silenced me. They did not allow me to speak. And I was very upset by that and conveyed my feelings to the organizers about that. And I was convinced they would not invite me back. But they did invite me back. But because of my experience, I think they've changed many of the rules of the conference this year, and most of the sessions are now being held behind closed doors with no media. So I'm still looking forward to engaging, whether it's open doors, closed doors, or no doors. This is an important time for discussion and debate, and it's critical for those of us with strong points of view to be able to express our opinions. With that in mind, I'm going to talk about, to me, one of the most pivotal moments in U.S. policy that I can remember, with an impact on the United States, most importantly, its relationship with China, and as Carol said, its relationship with the rest of the world. I just want to start off by highlighting two books that I would recommend that you take a look at. One is the so-called Project 2025 that was published last year by a conservative pro-Trump think tank, the Heritage Foundation. And it is turning out to be, despite President Trump's disavowal of the existence of this book, it's turning out to be a blueprint for everything that he's doing right now. And I've highlighted here 6 chapters of this book that I have read that in particular are extremely negative in terms of what they mean for China. And whether it's defense policy, foreign policy, development policy, our Department of Justice, commerce, or trade policy, where the tariffs are spelled out and authored by the recently incarcerated Peter Navarro, who is once again playing a senior role in the architecture of trade policy in the Trump administration. It's all there for you to see. And my fear is that, as I wrote in Accidental Conflict, that if policies like this are put in place, the tariff war, which started by President Trump in 2018, could turn into something far worse between the United States and China. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. The policies that have been put in place in the last 2 months are nothing short of a disaster for the United States, its allies, and its adversaries in the rest of the world. I'm not here to sugarcoat them at all. I think there's no way to put a pleasant characterization on what has been put in place so far. And I'll go through many of these as we go through. Tariffs, bilateral, multilateral, new measures to be introduced on basically all of the countries we run trade deficits with, over 100 of them, on April the 2nd. And the likelihood that these policies will trigger retaliation by our trading partners, leading to the type of global trade conflict we last saw in the 1930s. The policies have been aimed directly at the rule of law, the rule of constitutional law on which the United States was founded 248 years ago. We have a president who is focused on getting back at his political opponents. We have extraordinary conflict of interest between a leading industrialist who has taken on a role in dismantling the federal government. And the fact that he also has a large business commitment in China has not been lost on many. And then we have this cult in the United States called MAGA. MAGA has taken over the U.S. Congress. It's taken over the Department of Justice, which is an arm of the executive branch, which historically has defended the Constitution and which has represented the American people. The president has turned it into his personal legal support team, and has drawn support from what seems to be unlimited executive action by SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States. So, constitutionally, we are set up as three co-equal branches of government. If anything, Article 1 provides greater power to the Congress as the representative of the people, the executive branch and the judicial branch. Under Trump 2.0, they're being merged into one, driven by the MAGA cult, of which the president sits at the top of. If that's not bad enough, the policies are extremely disruptive when it comes to America's global role. Trump has challenged the historic alliances that have knit together the key post-World War II alliances between the United States and Europe. He's embraced an adversary, Russia, and he's threatened our friends in Western Europe. And this was executed by another one of the more infamous graduates of Yale, Vice President J.D. Vance. I don't want you to think this is a Yale problem, but there are a lot of other Yale graduates who have played equally destructive roles in recent years, including Yale Law School graduates. I now work for the Yale Law School, so I may not have a job when I come back, but Supreme Court Justices Clarence Thomas and Brett Kavanaugh are also products of what many believe is America's greatest law school. The president has attacked our neighbors to the north and to the south, and has expressed the view we all thought initially in jest about expanding American territory. Greenland, the Panama Canal, turning the Gaza Strip into a hotel. And of course, imploring Canada to become our 51st state. When he says these things, we say, oh, he can't be serious, you know, he's lost his mind. But to lose your mind, you have to have one to start with. And there are significant questions in that regard. I say this somewhat in humor, but I worry about it quite seriously. And then there's this whole idea of America, the exceptional country that has been the leader of the free world, built on a combination of hard power through military might and the moral authority of soft power. There are bigger questions about that than at any point in the post-World War II period. So, I start out, this will be the most negative part of my presentation. Just want to get it off my chest and out into the open that the shock of Trump 2.0 is not something that you can get used to. It's been a couple of bad months, and you know, things will get better. This is likely to be more of a permanent shock with significant long-term implications for economies, for alliances, and for the world order of this line at the bottom measures trade policy uncertainty. It's never been higher. And the problem with Trump 2.0 is it's not a standard shock. I mean, we know the way shocks work normally. I mean, look at COVID. You know, it was horrible. We locked down our economies. More extreme in China than anywhere. But when the lockdown is over, things get better because they normalize. The risk is this doesn't get better. And so it could be more of a permanent shock. There's this view here that, you know, there's a plan behind what Trump is doing. That, in fact, that he is the genius that he's always maintained that he is, despite the fact that he didn't go to Yale. And right now there is a view that the two leaders, President Xi and President Trump, will get together sometime soon and come up with a new plan to bring all of this together. For lack of a better term, it's been called the Mar-a-Lago Accord. And there's a lot of discussion about that, especially on the pages of the Financial Times, which is my favorite newspaper in the world. I write for them on a regular basis. And the so-called Mar-a-Lago Accord makes no sense to me whatsoever. And yet there's talk and there's hope that there's a genius to the disruption. Don't believe it. I do have a lot of slides here. I will skip some of them in the interest of time because I really want to get to your questions and answers. But I want to talk a little bit about my views of China, and then my views of the U.S. economy, and then tie them together in terms of the U.S. China conflict and what it means for the rest of the world. My views on China are still very cautious about medium to long-term prospects in China. The graph on the left highlights the 5-year growth trend in real GDP growth. It's come way down, obviously, in China, as you all know very clearly. The 5-year growth rate peaked at 11.7% in 2007. And if the IMF forecast is correct, by 2029, the 5-year growth rate will be 3.9%. A dramatic slowdown. Relative to peak growth rates, the slowdown is every bit as large, if not larger, than that which occurred in Japan. There are cyclical pressures and structural pressures at work, and the property sector problems remain ongoing. The government has been very focused on attempting to put a bottom on the property sector. The private sector has gotten a lot of focus, and the jury's out on whether or not that approach will work. I'll comment on that as well. There are the Japanese-like problems that China has been focused on for a number of years. The combination of demographic pressures brought about by the one-child family planning policy and the need to offset that by focusing on productivity. I have, in terms of my own research and books that I've written, articles that I've written, speeches that I've given, have focused most of my work on China's underconsumption problem and in particular the excesses of fear-driven precautionary saving that are brought about by an inadequate social safety net. I was delighted to see on Monday in Beijing the government released a 30-point action plan on household consumption in China. It shows that the government has finally started to read some of my books, even though the last book is not publicly available in China. I've brought as many over personally as I can. I've given some away right here at the Yale Beijing Center. I think my last presentation here, we had a prize, and the winners got copies, signed copies of the book, which makes it much more valuable when you want to sell the book on eBay. You know, I looked at this consumption plan, and its focus is encouraging, but its details are still lacking, especially the support for the safety net. So the jury is out on whether or not that will work. This is a simple but complicated chart, and it just underscores the fact that Xi Jinping has signed a contract with you, the Chinese people, to create a great modern socialist country by 2049 that will be on a par with the other great leading powers in the West. And the question is, can he do it? Can you do it? And the point of this chart is the dream can be realized only if China is able to experience more growth in the years ahead than it has recently. The per capita GDP growth rate has slowed. The red light, yeah, thank you. Has slowed from 8 to 4. It needs to go back halfway between where it was and where it is right now. And then the red line will converge on the blue line, and China will realize the Xi Jinping promise of the Chinese dream. If the per capita growth rate stays stuck at 4.1, you end up down here, and the dream does not become a good one, but a bad one with profound implications for the future relative to the promise. The key challenge, again, is to go back somewhere in between where China once was and where it is right now. Innovation has been a critical focus of the government, and it's a focus that's been evident for really the last 7.5 years, and it's been manifested in the form of significant improvements in China's leadership in driving global innovation, as approximated by this Global Innovations Index. But the emphasis on new quality productive forces is necessary, but not sufficient to realize the good dream of the Chinese dream of Xi Jinping. The reason I say it's necessary but not sufficient reflects the inadequacy of support from household consumption. The blue line on the chart on the left. The consumption share of your economy remains below 40%. And that's historically low for China and historically low for any leading advanced nation. And so you can have a lot of success in boosting new quality productive forces on the supply side, but if you do not have the domestic internal demand of consumers on the demand side, the progress of new quality productive forces becomes measured in terms of the excess capacity that gets pushed into global markets, which exacerbates the protectionist pressures that are now coming to bear on China. You can't, in technical terms, do, as the chart on the left describes, you can't improve TFP without boosting internal demand to absorb the dividends of TFP. You need both. And the government has been good at emphasizing one and not the other. The private sector obviously plays an important role, and you can see this picture in the lower right, the great meeting of February 17th, where all the entrepreneurs lined up in a fancy room and smiled. There's even a former businessman, second from the left, the only one not wearing the suit. Used to be an English teacher, you know who that is. He was there, he was smiling. The idea here is that the leadership gets together and they tell the entrepreneurs, feel good. Recapture those great animal spirits that were so important in the way you built your companies and drove innovations, and bring the private sector back. It's pretty clear that the message has gotten out, but will it work? John Maynard Keynes was the first to describe vividly this notion of animal spirits as being a spontaneous urge to action. Something that comes from the heart. It's organic. The human nature of risk-taking. Requires venture capital, startups, but most importantly, incredible hard work and creative spirit that comes organically. And the question I put to you is, can this type of animal spirit be driven by central government edict? We'll wait and see. The U.S. Trump has described the U.S. In the campaign of 2024 as a disaster. And yet, the only disaster I see is the one that he's creating. The graph is the so-called misery index we've used to describe the economic disaster in the United States. It's the sum of the unemployment rate and the inflation rate. It's low. You hear Trump talk about the disastrous economy during the Biden administration. The misery index in the Biden administration was equal to the post-World War II average of 9%. Trump says that the economy during his administration was the greatest economy in the history of the world. He says this, he believes it. The misery index during the first administration was no different than it is today. So by his own definition of the greatest economy in the world, America is just as great today as it was back then. Our misery index, 4% unemployment, 3% inflation, is identical to what it was during Trump 1.0. The question is, will this misery index hold where it is, or is it about to go up in light of what I said about policy earlier? I worry in particular about the business sector, in the policy, the environment of policy uncertainty that we're in right now. Businesses tend to freeze up on decision making. There's an old saying that uncertainty is the enemy of decision making, and the degree of uncertainty, as I showed you earlier, is at a record. And this will have an impact on business decisions with respect to employment, capital spending. These are long-term costly commitments that businesses make when they only have a clear understanding of what's going to happen in the future, and they don't have that now. And so they prefer to hold off. And I cite to you in particular the heavy capital spending plans of the companies, the so-called Magnificent Seven companies that are heavily related to artificial intelligence. Google, Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, Amazon, and one or two others that I can't remember. Their capital spending is set to NVIDIA. Sorry, how could I forget NVIDIA? They just announced they're going to be spending hundreds of billions of dollars over the next several years, if not trillions. And yet, the Magnificent Seven is clearly representative of an extraordinary revolution in machine learning, artificial intelligence technology. But the question is, the valuation of these companies in the stock market, and I would argue, as the green line lower left shows, that these companies are vastly overvalued. I don't care what kind of revolution it is, they've moved up 3.5 times in a 2-year period. By the end of last year, the Magnificent Seven accounted for 34% of the total value, capitalization value of the entire S&P 500. 34%. Revolution, sure, but 34% is beyond revolution by several multiples. By way of comparison, in March of 2000, the dot-com stocks accounted for 6% of the S&P 500. This is 34, 7 companies. Now, since I made that point a month or so ago, they have corrected, not because of me, but because of the fact that DeepSeek comes along and announces they can do just what the Magnificent Seven can do, but at 5 to 10% of the cost. And if you can do AI, revolutionary AI, at 5 to 10% of the cost, then the capital spending that you see in the lower right is coming down, not going up. And that has risk to the U.S. economy. And then finally, just to be fair, I talked about the Chinese dream, just some words on the American dream. You know, dreams are political. They're designed to appeal to the people. And the American dream has been just as an important part of our culture as the Chinese dream is to this country. And the American dream has played a key role in underpinning what we've called American exceptionalism, which is certainly an important part of the strength of the U.S. dollar. But the American dream, as powerful as it's been, has benefited fewer and fewer. Upper chart on the upper left. It's a dream that has been realized by the 1% at the cost of providing less benefits to the other 99%. And you look at the controversial budget bill that the Trump administration has just pushed through the MAGA-controlled Congress with great controversy, I might add. And if anything, it will intensify the income inequality because of the continuation of the Trump tax cuts that were put in place in the first administration will be maintained in the second administration. And that inequality, together with the challenges to America's extraordinary soft power, our character, our moral authority, the ethical underpinnings of the rule of law, our commitment to alliances, what Ronald Reagan called the image of the shining city upon a hill. Will we be able to maintain that aura of American exceptionalism in the years ahead? It's not an entitlement that's guaranteed to the leader of the West, especially if the leader of the West is now rethinking its commitments to friends and alliances. I think I will skip this. These are some charts on the lessons of Japan, seminar that I taught at Yale for a number of years, and the implications of China. It's been a source of active debate in China. There are a lot of similarities, there are a lot of differences. They're highlighted here in this chart here. If you take a quick screenshot, you can study these at your leisure. And this chart just summarizes that the key point is that the growth rate has slowed. The Chinese growth rate is still 4 times the speed of what Japan experienced during its 3 lost decades, but relative to prior peak growth rates, the slowing of the 2 economies, the 2 bars on the far right, are comparable, and that's a big deal. Your government, I think, recognizes the need to provide stimulus, and in the last 5 to 6 months has been very aggressive in doing so. First big stimulus, September 24th. further actions taken during the two sessions, and this week's 30-point action plan to boost the Chinese consumer. That's a clear indication of fiscal stimulus. If we look at China's stimulus through the lens of what Japan did to address its growth problem, there were three areas of focus. Former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called them three arrows: monetary, fiscal, and structural. And unfortunately, he was able to fire two of those arrows, but not the third. And the key lesson from Japan is the framework that Abe had was right, but the execution of the framework was inadequate because of the lack of the third arrow. And the risk is that you can raise the same questions about China. Strong fiscal monetary stimulus, but the structural issues, especially boosting household consumption, and in particular focused on the safety net, remain lacking in my view. The trade conflict, very similar between how the U.S. and Japan got into conflict late 80s and again today with China. And this compares the approach of Biden on the left with the approach of Trump on the right. Biden called his focus on Chinese technology the small yard and the high fence, a phrase that was identified by another brilliant Yale graduate, Jake Sullivan. And the risk is, in the second Trump administration, the yard becomes larger and the fence gets higher. And the president has signed 2 executive orders very early on in his presidency that are designed to do that. The America First trade policy, and then followed by the America First investment policy. Raising tariffs and adding this overlay of reciprocal tariffs on all of the nations that the U.S. runs trade deficits with. And here's the list. I update this list every year. I've shown it here before. It's too small for you to read. Unless you take a picture and then pinch your screenshot, you can go through and see them. We run trade deficits with a lot of countries, in large part because we don't save as a nation. When countries don't save and they want to grow, they import surplus savings from abroad, and they run massive current account and trade deficits to attract the capital. And so when we squeeze countries like China, and the Chinese portion of our trade deficit goes down, as it has since the imposition of the Trump tariffs in 2018 and 19, the Chinese piece went down, but the other pieces went up. And our overall trade deficit hit a record of $1.2 trillion last year. The policies didn't work. And the Chinese piece of our trade deficit was diverted to largely higher cost nations like Mexico, Vietnam, Taiwan, South Korea, Canada, Ireland, India, Germany. Trump has the view that the trade deficit is our biggest problem, that other nations have been ripping off the United States forever, and he's going to fix it by going after them one at a time. He can't do that, or he won't succeed in doing that as long as we have a domestic savings problem, and his budget that was just pushed through the Congress virtually guarantees that that problem will exist, continue to exist. This idea of reciprocal trade, Trump claims that he's discovered the fact that there is not reciprocity built into the world trading system. He's not really a keen student of the history of trade policy in the United States and the world. The U.S. made a terrible mistake on trade policy in 1930 by enacting the so-called Smoot-Hawley tariffs. Many believe, myself included, that these tariffs played an important role in transforming the recession into the Great Depression. The U.S. Congress agreed with that, and in 1934 passed a bill that countermanded the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. The bill was entitled the U.S. Reciprocal Trade Agreement Act, and it led to the establishment of the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, GATT, immediately after the end of World War II, as the foundational pillar of the global trading system, focused on reciprocal reductions in tariffs around the world. There were 8 rounds of multilateral reciprocal tariff adjustments enacted, starting in 1947 and going through the Uruguay round, which concluded in the mid-1990s. Reciprocity has been what the global trading system has been all about since its modern inception after World War II. Trump claims to have unique insight into a very different history. Finally, as Carol said when she introduced me, I want to talk about the way that the U.S. and China can better manage its relationship. I've written 2 books so far on the U.S.-China relationship. And there are books with uncomfortable, some might say negative conclusions. First book was called On Balance, which described the character of the relationship. It goes way back, where both countries depend on one another, but I closed that book by arguing that if both nations didn't rebalance their own systems, that this could lead to conflict. The second book was called Accidental Conflict, warning that the risks of conflict escalation had increased sharply since the first book, especially in light of the tariffs that Trump put in place in 2018 and 19 that were continued by Joe Biden in his administration. And so I concluded that book, as I argued at the start of this presentation, that we are on the brink where the trade conflict could become worse and under certain circumstances turn into an accidental, outright conflict between our nations. I don't want to stop there. So I am in the process of now writing a 3rd book that is focused on conflict resolution, a more constructive outcome for this mounting conflict. And just give you a preview of what I am attempting to do in framing the argument for conflict resolution. My main point is that the architecture of engagement is antiquated, obsolete, and is not able to really address the complexity, the multiplicity of issues that have arisen between our nations. We've placed too much reliance here on individuals to execute diplomacy, too much emphasis on personalization of conflict mediation and resolution, and not enough emphasis on building robust institutions to oversee, deepen, and enrich the relationship. The dangers of diplomacy is we expect human beings, leaders, to be brilliant in solving tough problems. This is an example of how diplomacy works in America. We have a president attacking a country at war with one of our former adversaries, Russia. I don't trust this type of leadership to solve a complex problem. And while I will not be nearly as critical of your own leader in your country, I don't trust him as one person to solve all the problems for China. This is a record of all the diplomatic efforts that have been that have occurred over the last 52 years, U.S. and China. Only 2 of them have been great. The other 23 have been mediocre at best. I would also draw your attention, though, to 2 highlighted here in 2017. The dinner party that President Trump held in Mar-a-Lago, and then another one that was held just down the street at the Forbidden City. Both of them in 2017 led to lavish dinners, great toasts, personal embraces about great friendship between the 2 leaders, followed immediately by tariffs. So there's talk of a birthday summit in June between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. Will this be the breakthrough that solves everything? We need more than a birthday party to resolve this conflict. My architecture of engagement has 3 pieces to it. I've talked about some of them before here. One is rebuilding trust. There is no trust, and it requires simple actions and tough actions. Secondly is to break away from focusing on trade through the zero-sum lens of bilateral imbalances, but to look at trade from a multilateral perspective. And in the case of U.S. and China, that's particularly important, given the multilateral reach of trade platforms in both of our countries. And I've highlighted, and my book will feature my proposal for a new organization that I've called a U.S. China Secretariat, which argues importantly that we need to move away from the personalization of leader-to-leader engagement to a more robust institution that manages all aspects of the relationship, that is located in a neutral venue, not Beijing, not Washington, and that is open for business 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that is focused on a number of critical administrative tasks, such as framing the relationship, making joint collaborative proposals, and developing policy white papers, bringing together experts to address tough problems from both sides, that develops its own common proprietary data bank, and most importantly, ensures validation, verification, and enforcement through a robust dispute resolution screening mechanism. So this is a proactive secretary as opposed to a passive secretary that exists in other global institutions like the United Nations and the OECD. And the Secretariat has critical analytical responsibility for looking at a wide range of all the problems that affect both nations, from economics and trade to technology to a number of, quote, existential global issues. And it looks at these problems through a bilateral as well as a multilateral lens. This architecture of trust, positive-sum focus on growth as opposed to zero-sum focus on deficits, and a new institutional framework will tilt the balance of the architecture to be balanced between leader-to-leader diplomacy and institutional support. I am not saying that leaders need to surrender power to a new organization. I'm saying that leaders need the reinforcement of an institutionalized body that gives expertise to the relationship that they are unable to provide individually. So again, the timeline of our relationship gives you strong hints of where we've been, where we are right now, and a big question mark at the end. And I've tried to capture that in the books that I've written or that I'm writing right now. The book I'm writing right now deals with the question mark at the end. But I just go back to the books that I started with this presentation with, comparing accidental conflict with Project 2025. That's a connection that I never wanted to make. But now that's a connection that is very much present in the increasingly contentious debate between our two countries and between America and the rest of the world. And it's not going to be addressed easily. So it's 8 o'clock. I'll stop here. I will be delighted to take any thoughts, questions from any of you on material that I've covered or left out. Thank you.